We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Wednesday. We had a podcast extra. I did a bunch of emails because I was so far behind. So that came out earlier yesterday. This one's coming out today. This will have some emails in it too, and that should bring me up to date. And I'm sorry for the delays. We've had a lot of guests on as of late. The guests are really good, so I have to make room for those guests. I'm not going to have the guests sit around while I read emails. This is all about getting input from people who listen to the show, whether it be emails or having them as guests on the show. We got some more coming up. Old Soul will not be on Thursday because she's in Texas doing some angelic works, as we've talked about, but she'll probably be on Sunday or Monday or something like that. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. A couple of things going on that you should know about. First of all, we know how Aileen Cannon, the judge down in the classified documents case in Florida, she dismissed the case completely. A lot of people got upset about that. A lot of people are worried about that. Fact of the matter is this exactly what we've been waiting for, her to make a decision that can be appealed. And Jack Smith and his special counsel group announced yesterday that they will be appealing that decision. What's nice about that is that they'll be able to pull in all the other shit too, pile it on the 11th Circuit, and let them decide what to do. They'll most certainly overturn that decision. And this is probably putting Jack Smith in a good position to ultimately get her kicked off the case. So, for the people that were upset, you're finally going to get what you wanted, an appeal to the 11th Circuit. They said they're going to do it. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I know the Republicans are out there cheering this, but they haven't won anything yet. In fact, this may be a loss for them in the long run. So, we'll see what happens. Now, the RNC has started. It started Monday. And the funny thing about the RNC, I know Donald Trump's big on ratings, but the ratings haven't been great. Not as good as the last time around. There seems to be a lot of low energy from the crowd there. They've got people that are giving speeches, people like Nikki Haley yesterday. It's funny with Nikki Haley. For 1 minute, she's all in on Donald Trump, and then she hates Donald Trump, and now she's back supporting Donald Trump. This poor woman has sold her soul, as so many others have. It's going to be interesting once Donald Trump goes down. What are they going to do then? They're going to have that stink hanging over them for the rest of their lives, and they're going to be sorry for their complicity. Now, we'll talk about the shooting just briefly before we get into the emails. We'll probably talk about it more during the emails. But what we know about this shooter, he's 20 years old. He's a Republican, NRA member. We know now that his parents were big-time Trump-a-fucks and big-time gun owners. We know Dad bought the gun that the kid got. It'll be interesting to see if there's any backlash on Dad for buying the gun and allowing his kid to get it. It's really interesting. Now, there's a lot of people talking about this shooting. Somebody said to me, oh, does this give Donald Trump the win? Well, no, of course not. Some interesting things about this. The Republicans will say, well, they shot at Donald Trump, so that's an automatic win for them. They say that every time something happens, and it's absolute bullshit. Here's what I've noticed about this. Now, this shooting may embolden the people that were already going to vote for Donald Trump, so that doesn't gain anything. The only hope he could get is get some sympathy for the people who wouldn't vote for him before and would vote for him now. That doesn't seem to be the case. Fact of the matter is most people that wouldn't have voted for him aren't sympathetic to him. Most of them are saying it was a hoax, it was fake, it was staged. If there was some plan to get some sympathy off of this, I don't think it's working. And what's interesting, as you watch this, it seems like the steam is running out on the story, which is strange. This is a huge story. A former president, attempted assassination. This should be the big story for months to come. But it seems like the Republicans are trying to step away from it too. And why might that be? Well, because there's some fishy shit behind it. I don't know what it is, actually. I'm not going to say it was staged because I have no proof of that. But there is some sketchy things, as we talked about yesterday with Will. But here's the interesting thing. Donald Trump went to the RNC convention tonight and had what appeared to be uh, a maxi pad on his ear. Oh, it looked adorable. But the interesting thing is that he was out golfing and doing other things before that, and he wasn't wearing it. And the funny thing is everything I've seen about his ear, I don't see any marks on it. And I go back to what I said before. If you get shot by an AR-15 with a high velocity round, and it even nicks your ear, it's going to do some damage. So I don't know if that adds to the conspiracy theories or not. It's just a fact. As I've said before, let us see the ear. Let us hear the doctor's report. It couldn't have been too bad because you were golfing the next fucking day. See, I think this is where Donald Trump is failing and where the Republicans are failing in this. If Donald Trump had actually been injured and laid up for a few days or a week or a month or something like that, that sympathy might be there. But everything that's happened and the way Donald Trump is behaving, it does seem like it could be a little sketchy. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin. What if it was real? And what if Donald Trump was surprised by this? Well, if someone's taken a shot at you and you don't know about it, this is going to change you, knowing that somebody out there wanted to take you out. And now you're a presidential candidate and you have to go out and talk to the people. You'd be looking over your shoulder all the time. And maybe I'm misreading or reading too much into this, but if you look at Donald Trump's face while he's at that RNC, um, he's different. He looks different. He looks a little pensive, maybe a little nervous, and maybe he should be. Now, people are waiting for him to do his speech on Thursday. Donald Trump said he rewrote the speech, that there might be some changes to his personality and his ideas. And people are suggesting to me, well, if he comes out there and comes off nicer, maybe he'll have a chance to beat Joe Biden. Really? I don't care how nice he's going to be. The fact that he champions Roe v. Wade being overturned and says he's completely responsible. It doesn't change that he has 34 felony charges. It doesn't change that he's connected to Jeffrey Epstein and was part of a lawsuit where he was a co-defendant with Jeffy about raping a 13-year-old woman. Having Donald Trump coming up and giving a speech at a lightly attended RNC and lightly watched RNC, if he all of a sudden becomes nice, that's not going to change anything. And the fact of the matter is we've got 4 months yet to go. Donald Trump can't play nice for 4 months. He's going to lose his shit again and again and again. And I think Joe Biden's doing the right thing, coming out, doing interviews, giving speeches, and going after Donald Trump. That's really what he needs to do. That accomplishes a couple of things. People learn about the crimes and corruption of Donald Trump, and it will piss Donald Trump off, causing him to go off the deep end, to become unhinged. So I hope he continues to employ that strategy. All right. Let's get to some emails. This first one comes from Henry. He says, "Hi, Mike. I stumbled upon your podcast a year ago and listened on and off. Now I look forward to each installment. Thanks for your optimism on the next election. It gives me hope. I must admit, I don't share your optimism. I really fear for this country to the point that I'm becoming depressed. Hearing you be so positive does make it better, at least just a bit. Hopefully, you know more about this than I do. Just curious, did you predict Trump's win against Clinton in 2016? Just curious. Henry, I brought this up in a previous podcast because I saw this coming. And as a matter of fact, I did predict Donald Trump would win in 2016. You know, I was a lot less invested into this. I didn't know what was to come with Trump. I really wasn't as involved in politics. But I had a friend who was more Republican leaning, and that was a time when Republicans and liberals could actually talk. Um, I told him, I said, I think Donald Trump is going to win. And he said, oh, no, no, that's not, they'll never let him win. They'll never let him win. And I said, well, no, I think he will. He says, I'll bet you $100. I don't usually make $100 bets because I'm not much of a gambler. But I took that one because I knew I was right. And of course, Donald Trump won, and I got $100. And that was the last positive thing I ever got out of fucking Donald Trump. I also did predict that Joe Biden would win in 2020, in spite of the fact that a lot of folks didn't. I also predicted the fact that there would be no red wave in 2022. And you have to understand, these aren't predictions. This isn't some psychic paranormal thing that I just know things. I don't have that ability. What it was just taking a look at the facts. See, now, Henry, you're doing what everybody else does. You're scared. You have fear involved, and it's justified given the the possibilities here. For whatever reason, whether I'm incredibly healthy or incredibly sick, I take the emotions out of it. I don't listen to the shit from the media. I don't listen to the shit from the Republicans or the Democrats for that matter. I look at the facts. You can look at the things that they try to get you emotional about. But when you consider all the facts that Donald Trump is, in fact, the worst presidential candidate carrying the most baggage in the history of this country, from the 34 convictions to Jeffrey Epstein to overturning Roe v. Wade to the Supreme Court decision, all these things, stealing classified documents. Regardless of what polls say, there's a lot of people frightened out there. And in 2020, we had a lot of people frightened. And what happened? We had a massive turnout. 150 million people voted. Joe Biden won 81 million to 74 million. And this is when most Republicans were still on board with Donald Trump. Now, since that time in 2020, Donald Trump has done nothing to gain support, gain votes. If he's done anything, he's lost support and votes. And this is what I mean. The Republican Party is no longer unified. When Donald Trump was in the primaries, he lost 15 to 20 points to Nikki Haley, and Nikki Haley wasn't even on the ballot. People think that is support of Nikki Haley, and it's not. It's basically a protest vote against Donald Trump. There are people in the Republican Party that will refuse to vote for Donald Trump because they see him for what he is. He's destroying and dismantling the Republican Party. And then you look at the independents, which are absolutely necessary for any Republican to win an election. And we know at least half of those independents have said, yeah, we're not voting for him. So when you factor all those things together, there is no way he can win the election. Just no way. They'll say, well, he'll cheat. Well, he cheated in 2020 and he was the president and he still failed. So what makes you think that he could cheat now with Joe Biden, the president, and him just a civilian? You see, you got to look at the facts. Take a look at it. Make a calculated guess. And that's what I do. It's not a prediction. I look at the facts and see how it will play out. And that's what I see. All right. Thank you, Henry. Next one comes from Rick. Mike, have widely shared the piece you did following the attack on Trump and couldn't agree more about not taking our eye off the ball. This violence is exactly what he's been calling for. I'm a New York Times #1 best-selling author and the National Geographic journalist portrayed by Adam Driver in the movie Tracks. Would love to send you my recent book, The Good Fight, on the history of social justice. Is there a physical mailing address or FedEx? Thanks again for such an eloquent piece. Wow. That's interesting. We've got a celebrity joining us on the emails. Yeah, Rick, you can just send it to Mike at P.O. Box 148, Mound, Minnesota, 55364. That's P.O. Box 148, Mound, spelled Mound, Minnesota, 55364. Thank you, Rick. I'm looking forward to seeing the book. I haven't seen the movie. Now I'm going to have to check that movie, and of course I'll read the book. Thank you very much. All right. This one comes from, I think, Tina. Dear Mike, I'm really not one to delve into conspiracy theories, but I can't put it past Trump to set this assassination attempt up. Would he sacrifice lives to get a leg up? I put nothing past him. He wants to win to stay out of jail. It seems staged to me, and I'm very skeptical. What do you think? Regards, Blue Dot in Ruby Red, Indiana. Yeah, that's the tough thing. I hate to jump on the bandwagon and say, "Oh, it was staged." Um, and initially, my reason for saying it wasn't staged was because people actually died. And if somebody staged things to do this, they either failed horribly or they just don't care. But then I started thinking about what you're saying here. Is Trump above that? And the crazy thing is, he's not. He doesn't care about other people. All he cares about, as you point out, that he wants to stay out of fucking jail. At this point, for what I know, I would say it's not staged. And if it isn't, Donald Trump's mind is going to be whirring around. But I can't say it's not staged because of all the facts and all the sketchiness of this particular incident and what we know of Donald Trump. I just hope if there's an investigation and it was staged, I hope we find out. I'm not sure that we will. I just don't trust the government. I don't trust law enforcement or the DOJ to tell us everything we need to know. But I'm with you. I don't disagree with you. All right. The next one says, Hi, Mike. I enjoyed being on the podcast again. I was thinking about the Secret Service not covering the rooftop the shooter was on. I remember in 2012 when Barack Obama was running for re-election. I was in the process of moving over that summer, and Obama was making a campaign stop near me. I happened to be on the highway when his motorcade was going through. The police were driving on both sides of the road, and they blocked off every intersection, driveway, and any possible road access until after Obama passed by. It was amazing to see and seemed like much different response compared to Butler, PA. Now, I'm not surprised that Cannon dismissed this case. Hawk said a while ago he thought she would dismiss it to force the 11th Circuit to recuse her. He thought she wanted off the case but wanted to appear loyal to Trump. I think she's playing to an audience of one and auditioning to replace Thomas or Alito if Trump should miraculously get elected. Well, first of all, in terms of the Secret Service, back when I was doing traffic reporting, and we had maybe 700 cameras all over the freeways. There were occasions when the president or vice president came to town, and I would watch what happened. And what would happen when they drive on a Friday, they'd clear the roadway, the freeway, shut off all ramps coming to the freeway, and it would be dead stop for everybody until the motorcade came through. I don't know if they do that for former presidents, but it's surprising if they don't take those kinds of precautions. I've seen it a number of times, and I've had people complaining to me, well, I got stopped up in traffic. Of course, it's my fault because I'm the traffic reporter. And I said, well, the fucking president came through. Not my fault. They even did it one time with Mikhail Gorbachev came through. I happened to be working doing traffic. It was on a weekend, which I didn't normally work, but that's when Mikhail Gorbachev would have been in Minnesota. And it was really weird because our offices were right on the top of a ramp coming from 35W to go into downtown Minneapolis. And we were looking out a window and watched how Gorbachev's motorcade came up the ramp and passed us. And the interesting thing is they had Russian cars. They apparently brought their own fucking cars. All right. Now, who do you think DJT will select to be his attorney general if elected? My money is on Cannon. Mike, DJT will only select people for positions who will only do what he says. It's alarming to say this, but America resembles Nazi Germany in many ways, Charles. Yeah, whoever he puts in any of these positions will be absolute jokes. But the important thing is, Charles, he's not going to be president of the United States. That's what I get tired of hearing in all the media. Well, if Donald Trump wins, this will happen. If Donald Trump wins, that will happen. I've yet to have anybody tell me what the path for Donald Trump is to win. Polls? Fucking polls? The media lies to us, tells us that the polls are tanking for Joe Biden after that debate. It's just not true. They haven't really changed at all. And I don't think the polls are indicative of what's really going to happen. So, yeah, if Donald Trump got in, I think a couple things would happen. I think he would start naming people that weren't qualified to be in positions, and they would be there until they did something to piss Donald Trump off, and he would fire them. But I also think the Democrats, you're going to see some potential violence on that side. There are people terrified that Donald Trump will be president of the United States. And if that were to occur, terrified people react irrationally. And I hate to say that, but that's what happens. And I think the people on the left, while they're considered less violent than the Republicans, and they are, if they see that their country is going away and the future is done because Donald Trump is president, desperate times call for desperate measures. And I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that would happen. But thankfully, like I said, Donald Trump won't be president. So we're all getting worried, clutching our pearls for nothing. All right, the next email. Your show has been getting me through the past 2 weeks, especially with all the BS coming from corporate media, including MSNBC. It's intolerable. I listen to you each day to regain my sanity. Ed is particularly spot on, as are Old Soul and all your guests. Well, except Larry. Oh, boy. But I'm writing you to say that Donald Dumpster Fire has not and will not be held accountable at all, ever before or after the election, win or lose. Any political appetite for accountability will subside even if Biden wins. The forces that protect him now are the same that will protect him after the election, win or lose. Here's my scorecard, so to speak, on Trump accountability. Number one, has he actually paid a dime of the 90 million in civil sexual assault case? He lost, yes, but other than words, not a dime has come out of his pocket. I don't agree. If it's not come directly out of his pocket, he is going to be held accountable for wherever that money came from. There's about 275 million, roughly, maybe 250 in a bond right now that he can't touch, he can't access, and will never get back. If that didn't come out of his pocket, and I think some of it did, came from his billionaire buddies, but those billionaire buddies are going to want their money back at some point. They don't just hand people money. So if you're suggesting that that money hasn't impacted him at all, I think you're wrong about that. Has he actually paid a dime of the 450 million, which now been magically reduced down to 275 million in the civil fraud case? Well, you're not paying attention. It has not been reduced to 275 million. That was just the amount of the bond. They reduced the amount of the bond. Donald Trump, once the appeals are done, he will have to come up with $450 million. That hasn't changed. He lost, yes, but other than the words, not one dime has come out of his pocket yet. And like I say, that's not true. I get this question all the time. Where do you think the fucking money came from? They aren't going to put up a bond unless the money is available. He either had to come out of his pocket, come out of his PAC, or somebody had to gift him the money. But then there's going to be other issues if somebody just gave it to him. So to suggest no money's come out of his pocket, this is just not true. Has the media followed up on the funky sourcing of his bail arrangement? Well, there you go. You're not paying attention. Yeah, the first time he posted a bond, it was weird. It was fucked up. It was a scam. They told him, no, you can't use that. And immediately thereafter, Donald Trump came up with some way to post a bond that was credible for New York State, and that's what he did. This isn't just invisible money. The money has to be there for the bond, and it has to come from someplace. Georgia election interference stalled indefinitely over BS. Tell us something we don't fucking know. And as I've told you, I don't care if it's stalled till after the election. The idea that he won't be held accountable is a little frantic, a little panicky. That's not true. Number 4, federal election interference case delayed indefinitely. Judge Chutkan now has to categorize every official and personal act, which then gets sent up to the Supreme Court. Given the Supreme Court's immunity decision and how evidence can and cannot be used, how do you think they will rule in favor of? The Supreme Court has effectively drowned the case. Well, you've got to understand there's a couple of things that don't pan out real well for Donald Trump in this situation. And they're panicking about that. Look, Judge Chutkan is going to decide what's official and what's not official. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. She is probably going to run mini trials. So all the evidence against Donald Trump will become public, which he doesn't want to happen. He wants them to say, well, just make your decision based on law. Now, that's not going to work. They're going to go through it all. She's not going to take the risk of being appealed to the Supreme Court and losing it. So now the Republicans are going to have to deal with the fact that all this evidence is going to come to light before the election, even though the trial won't happen until the election. Now, say she does that and they appeal to the Supreme Court. Yes, we may run into the same problems, but understand this won't happen till after the election. And if what happens is what I say, and Biden wins and the Democrats win the House and the Senate, how do you think the Supreme Court's going to act then? Joe Biden just yesterday said that he's looking to back reforms of the Supreme Court. Once the Democrats have power, the Supreme Court's going to have to react a lot differently. We're talking about the prospect of Clarence Thomas being indicted. There's going to be a special counsel that's investigating his shit. They're looking to try to impeach Alito. Now, that's not going to happen in this session because of the way the Republicans have control of the House. However, after the election, there's a whole different picture. So you want to look for all the things that are negative and you want to cry and hold yourself and rock back and forth. You got to look at the facts. You got to have a little foresight as to what's going on. Number 5, classified documents case, dead. Cannon just dismissed the whole case. Yes, Jack Smith will appeal, but ultimately it winds up in the Supreme Court's hands. And again, who do you think it will decide for? Again, what I said before, it will go to the 11th Circuit. It will be appealed. They'll overturn the decision and they will kick Cannon off the case. Will it go to the Supreme Court? Yeah, it will. But you got to understand the idea of agreeing with Cannon on this when no other court has ever agreed with Cannon on this. This comes with some problems. Like, for example, if you tell us that the special counsel isn't constitutionally correct, we have over 100 years of special counsels. Does that mean all of them weren't valid? Does that mean we should let Hunter Biden just go because he had a special counsel? Special counsel looked into Joe Biden. There's only so far they can go to be corrupt. They can't do it to hurt themselves. They came close in this immunity thing because they, in essence, gave Joe Biden immunity more so than Donald Trump. And that may hit them in the face at some point between now and November. Again, listen to me. If you want to say all the sky is falling, the world is done, you want to cry about it, all I have to say is, what do you want to do? You're just going to cry? Is that what you're going to do? Well, that's bullshit and that's weak, and I don't even want to hear that. Number 6, NYS business records case, guilty on all 34 counts. However, tiny crack opened up because of the Supreme Court immunity decision, and sentencing is now delayed till mid-September. So far, what has been convicted of are just words on paper. I believe it when it happens. Oh, cry. Listen, he's going to be sentenced in September. Fact of the matter is, it's better that he's sentenced in September as opposed to July because it's closer to the election. It's going to have a bigger impact. Mueller report. Nothing came out of it, even after the time and effort, media attention, and taxpayer dollars. Garland didn't pursue any of Mueller's findings of Trump crimes. Well, the Mueller report showed all kinds of obstruction of justice by Donald Trump. But the problem we had there, what did you think was going to come out of the Mueller report? Nothing was ever going to come out of the Mueller report because of that little memo in the FBI that says we don't prosecute sitting members or sitting presidents. And at that time, Donald Trump was the sitting president that wasn't going to do that. Now, after the fact, they could actually charge him with obstruction of justice from the Mueller report. They could. But there's so many other things that they're charging him with, they don't really have to do that. All right. Number 8. Let's see here. And I lost my spot. Hold on a second here. You got to bear with me. Garland waited 2 years until forced by the great work of the House January 6th committee to hire a special counsel. Tell me something I don't know. I've said the same thing. Garland, after November, has to fucking go. He's the wrong choice for the attorney general, and we've got to get somebody better. And we will. And then how does that change things? Number 9, the Colorado and other state cases to keep Trump off the ballot. Nope. Supreme Court shaped the words of the Constitution to help Trump. It doesn't matter. When they first started that whole thing, we knew he wasn't going to be kept off the ballot. This is not a surprise to anybody. All right. He says, my point. I'm anxious to get to the point. I'm probably forgetting other cases, but it goes on. My point is that Trump has so far not been held accountable at all. That's bullshit. He will skate entirely on actually paying even a penny of the hundreds of millions of dollars he owes. He will avoid any material accountability. Real accountability means something other than just indictments, fines to be paid, or punishments to be served in the future. Despite all the shit he's done to date, Trump has skirted any real accountability. The courts, Supreme or otherwise, have not pinched out one punitive dime. You're wrong, and I pointed that out earlier. And I tell you what, you seem pretty confident about that. You want to bet me $100 on that? You want to bet? From no money from Trump's pocket so far. Not true. He can't even be sentenced on time. The whole system, corporate media included at the highest levels, are protecting him. He will continue to avoid justice even after the elections. How? How? When he loses the election and the Republicans walk away from him, who's going to protect him? Nobody. So far, Boomer, looking back, we have nothing in terms of accountability for Trump. Accountability for Trump is always something that will occur tomorrow or the next day. As soon as we get close to accountability for Trump in a real material way, something happens and he avoids it because the timeline gets shifted to a later time, or simply muscles people to decide his way, or he does another bad thing to bump the whole bad thing out of the news cycle. We won't stop fighting for accountability. Thanks for being a much needed voice during these times. John, New York. Now, John, I thank you for the email, and I appreciate the fact that you're a listener. But I will say this: you're falling into the same problem that I hear all the time. Well, I want what I want to happen when I want it, and if it doesn't happen, well, then it's never going to happen. That's bullshit. That's a weak fucking attitude. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult you, but I tend to be blunt. And I dislike it when people who are in a war, because that's what we are, we're in a war, that just give up and say, oh, it's going to be bad, so I'm just going to not care and just let them win. That's not how this works. John, if you're concerned about accountability, if you're concerned about the future of this country, don't take that attitude. Continue to fight. I mean, if you're in a war and you're surrounded by the enemy, do you just lay down and let them shoot you? Is that what you're going to do? Please, John. You're from New York, for God's sake. You're tougher than that. All right. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. We're going to continue with some emails. And I just want to say something. There's a lot of people who hear me respond to, like I did with the last email, and they go, "You're just too mean. You're not going to have any listeners if you keep talking to people that way." Here's the deal. When I talk about an email and I'm contrary to what they think, and I get a little irritated about it, this has nothing to do with the emailer personally. This is about society in general. I don't like to hear about weakness. I don't like to hear about, well, it's not going my way and I'm just going to pout about it, because that's the impression I get. This isn't about the emailer. This is about the general consensus of a lot of folks out there. I'm grateful for John to listen. I hope he continues to listen. I welcome every email he sends. But you have to understand, this is a platform to discuss things. And even though most of us here in this podcast, in the audience, are of a like mind, we all have different perspectives, different feelings. We have some with fearful and some that aren't fearful. And if I hear something that I think weakens what we're trying to do, I'm going to push back. And if that bothers you and it hurts your feelings, well, then this is not the place for you. This is where we're going to talk about real things and talk about them in a real way. I've got many people that will come to me and say these things personally, and I will push back to family and friends that way. And hopefully they understand I'm not attacking them personally. I'm talking about the ideology of all this stuff. We're in a war. We have to fucking win. And whatever we have to do, we will do. And if we've got people on our side that aren't focused in the right direction, I'm going to do what I can to point them in the right direction. Not only yell at them saying, yeah, you're wrong, try to explain to them why they're wrong. There are many times people are wrong. There are many times I'm wrong. You know, I sit with somebody like Will or Eric or Old Soul. There are many times I learn a lot of things from these folks. And not only just those people that come on the show, but from these emails. We're fortunate that we have a relatively diverse crowd of people listening. Everybody has their perspective. I learn from everybody's perspective, but there will be points where I disagree with it, and I happen to be a little blunt. That should be pretty well known by now. So if your feelings are easily hurt, don't write an email, because I'm not doing it to hurt you or push you away. I'm doing it to try to explain what I'm thinking. And I want you to understand that so that we can go forward and win this fucking war. So, John, you're from New York. I'm sure I don't know if you're from New York City, but I'm sure you're used to people um, bumping heads with you. I mean, I get people bumping heads with me all the time. I don't take it personally. I just enter into the debate. All right. Next one says, hello, Mike. We are living through a surreal time, in my opinion. Never did I think I'd be living through these crazy times. America voted in a loser and destroyer in Donald Trump. He brought out the hatred in America like no other, and the Republicans and the media have helped him in this. The media is failing us again. They're letting the Republicans gaslight us by blaming the left for what happened to Trump. They blame us, the Democrats, for having violent rhetoric. Funny thing, though, I remember all those Republicans running for office making commercials or ads with their rifles, shooting at ballot boxes. Some were hunting rhinos. And of course, our favorite Marjorie Taylor Greene shooting socialist. How about Lauren Boebert and Thomas Massey taking family Christmas photos with their kids, all having rifles in their arms? The right has hit list of people, mostly Democrats, to be hunted and prosecuted. How about the Republican that's running for governor in North Carolina that said some people needed killing? How about the president of the Heritage Foundation that produced Project 2025, Kevin Roberts, who said, we are in the second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. And of course, we all know the horrible and violent things Trump has said over the years. So please tell how we are the ones that are violent. They want to silence us by calling them out for their bad policies that hurt Americans and raising the alarm of Project 2025, which allows the fascist takeover of our government. Sadly, red states have over the years been enacting Project 2025, and people need to be aware. We have to stay focused and keep our eye on the prize, and that's winning elections. Stay safe, everyone. Ballots, not bullets. Thanks, V. Well, V, thank you very much for your insight. And I will tell you this, I've talked about this and I will talk about it again. I am absolutely disappointed in all mainstream media, all mainstream news outlets, cable and otherwise. I watched Lester Holt be interviewed or interviewing Joe Biden. Absolute travesty, and Lester Holt's taken some heat. Now, this is a guy who was a beloved newsman, and he's getting some hits. I listened to MSNBC yesterday. Katie Tur is the commentator, and she had Eric Trump on there because it's at the RNC. And what struck me is when they first got on, it was clear and they made it known that they've known each other a long time, that they were even friends. I can deal with that. But here's Eric Trump telling lie after lie, and there was not one effort of pushback. I don't know where to turn right now to get any mainstream media information. There are some people on MSNBC I like, Lawrence O'Donnell, Joy Reid, those kind of people. But there's a lot of them that just want to push forward this narrative that Joe Biden should step aside and that the Republicans have a point. They don't have a point. They're fucking criminals. They're corrupt. And what you're seeing out of the Republicans is exactly what you see out of bullies. They will get in your face and try to scare you so that you submit. If you don't submit and you push back, well, then they claim to be the victims. This is standard fare for these kind of people. And we've got to learn how to deal with it. For me, I'm less interested in listening to the mainstream media. I think I'm going to stick to those people on the internet, people who do what I do, Midas Touch, and those sorts of things. It's really hard to find a legitimate journalist giving facts. They're quickly becoming endangered in mainstream media. All right, next up. Dear Mike, thank you for being a calming influence. I'm truly sad about what Trump ushered into our country. Could it be that the fucktard is exactly what we needed to wake up? Thank you again, Boomer, for countering the doom and despair with the media that bombards us with. I can hardly wait each day for your new post. Sincerely, Blue Dot in Indiana. Well, I appreciate that very much. And I think somebody needs to calm this. As I've said, this is all a strategy. Scare a bunch of people into submission and then just take over that way. They're cowards. They're weak. And that's the only way they can win. Somebody has to calm people down and say, wait a minute. I'm not afraid of you motherfuckers. And that's what I try to do here. I mean, that's my own personal credo. I'm not afraid of motherfuckers. If you're a bully, I know you're weak. And I'm going to expose that when I can. And was this a positive, this Trump thing? And I've talked about this before. I think it was. I think a lot of the criminality and corruption we're seeing in the government right now has been going on for decades. But Donald Trump is like a fucking boil. He brings everything to the surface. And now we've seen it. We can't unsee it. And as much as Donald Trump is causing problems right now, when we're all done with him, when he's gone by the wayside, we have a lot of work to do because now we're aware of some serious problems in this country. And for that, I think it's a good thing. You know, people say to me, well, if Donald Trump loses and the Democrats get control of the House and Senate, you won't have anything to talk about. It's not true. We got a big mess in this country, and now we've got to put the pressure on the Democrats to try to fix this. And if not them, then we'll get somebody else. Hi, Mike. I love your show. This is my first email. My question for you is why do all reports say that Trump says he was shot in the ear, but none of the medical personnel who treated him have described his injury? I don't know a ton about guns, but how could that type of weapon the shooter used have only grazed the former president's ear. Maybe you could have a weapons specialist come on to the show to discuss. I appreciate the great work you do every day. Thank you, Beth B. in Brooklyn. Yeah, I've talked about that before. I'm not a gun expert by any means, but I know a little bit about it. I know the AR-15 is a pretty powerful rifle. It's got a high velocity round, and I've said it before, even if it just grazed his ear is going to take a chunk out. And everything I've seen after the incident and since the incident doesn't show any chunks taken out of his ear. He spends time wearing a patch, and then other times he's got this mini pad on. Yeah, I've said that before. You want us to believe in this thing, to trust what you're telling us? Show us the ear, show us the medical report, and then we'll talk about it. But it doesn't seem like Donald Trump's any worse for wear after being shot at, because he's out fucking golfing the next day. All right, the next one says, Dear Mike, thank you so much for addressing this on your page. After reading this piece in the Washington Post, I find it impossible to believe that Trump was even grazed by a bullet from the attempted assassin's gun. Stunning how no one from the press seems to want to touch this, and they just let him keep saying he was shot. Goes back to what I said before. The media, the mainstream news outlets, they're fucking absolutely worthless. They're working against this country and the people in this country. And I'm at a point, I'm just not going to watch them anymore. I may listen in the background just to get tips on the current news stories, but I'm not going to trust them for any facts. I guarantee you that. All right, the next one says, Hey, Boomer, I'm not much into conspiracy theories, but one thing that creeped into my mind was how Diaper Donnie met with the leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, on Thursday, 2 days before the assassination attempt. We all know how Orban is tight with Putin. It wouldn't surprise me if there were some sort of plan set up through Putin to make Trump look like a victim to help in the polls. Around the 4th of July, Trump's plane was spotted next to Putin's plane in Dallas airport. Just strange and something that makes me think. We all know how Putin is a pro at having people taken out. What are your thoughts? Oliver from Massachusetts. Well, you can't help but think about that. The other thing you have to understand is that when Donald Trump was promoting this event in Truth Social, he made an interesting statement. He said, all hell's going to break loose. It's interesting because the last time he said all hell's going to break loose, we had January 6th. I don't know if it was staged, but as you say, it all seems very fishy. And it's easy enough to prove this. Like I say, show me the ears, show me the doctor's report, but they don't seem to do that. You know, the day it happened, I decided I was going to try to be respectful and be solemn about this because that's the right thing to do. But by the next day, Donald Trump is out golfing, and they're selling T-shirts, hats, and mugs. So far as I'm concerned, the whole grieving period is over. I'm not thinking about that shooting anymore or feeling any sympathy for Donald Trump or the Republicans because they clearly don't care. And if you notice something about the shooting, it's losing steam pretty quick. I mean, 60 years later, we're still talking about the Kennedy assassination, but you're hearing less and less about that every day. I think and this is typical of Donald Trump. He's about big flash in the pan images to try to get people to change their minds. But then after that, he kind of lays off of it and he lets it fade off into obscurity. People think this is going to be a big thing with the election in November. I'll tell you this will be like every other news story we've seen when it comes to Donald Trump. There'll be something else and something else and something else, and this will be long forgotten. They might be pressed to prove their situation, but they won't. The only hope we have here is if the FBI does the investigation and finds some things out. The only question I have is if they investigate and if they find it out, will they tell us? And I can't honestly say that I know. I don't know that they'll tell us. All right. The next one says, "Hi, Mike. I'm writing this email in response to one of the emails you read yesterday implying that Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, wasn't at Joe Biden's rally in Detroit due to her lack of support for him. No hate to the emailer, and I know the optics can lead to that conclusion, but I just have to say that she was on The Tonight Show with Stephen Colbert, literally the night before the rally, and she came out in support of Joe Biden. She said that he was up for the job, and she's the co chair of the Biden Harris campaign and is working her tail off to get him elected." Those were her words. I was so happy to hear her say those things because I was getting frustrated with Democrats like Nancy Pelosi not stating their support for Joe running. Thank you, Mike, for letting us, your audience, have a voice. We are riding with Biden V. Thank you, V. I mean, that's the thing. We all have different bits of information and different perceptions. And then we get a chance to hear it from a different perspective and more facts. Thank you for that. There is no hate to the emailer. I think it might have even been Old Soul. God forbid anybody give Old Soul hate. We all love Old Soul. But that doesn't mean we always get it right. I certainly don't always get it right. And hopefully I become aware when I'm not right and I will own up to it. So thank you, V. My wife read me a blurb about President Biden called the widow of the fireman that was killed at the Trump rally. She refused to take the call because her husband was a supporter of Trump. Trumplafucks drank the Kool-Aid by the gallon and no respect for anyone. Pieces of shit. Ken from Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Yeah, I heard that story. What's interesting about that is that he did call her like a good president would. She refused to take the call because she said her husband, who's now dead, would not want her to take it. Okay, that's her right. She did also say she held no malice toward Joe Biden for this. She just didn't want to take the call. But here's the interesting thing. Not only did Donald Trump not call her, he didn't even mention the dead man's name. That's how little he thinks about his own people. Thank you very much. All right, the next one says, "Hey, Boomer, I'm not much into conspiracy." Okay, I think I read this one. This is an old one. Wait a minute here. Maybe not. Maybe it's just the same thing. Okay, we did talk about this. I didn't give the name. We're talking about Diaper Don and the Viktor Orban connection and the planes next to Putin. That came from Oliver. And the last line he said, "We all know Putin is a pro at having people taken out. What are your thoughts?" Well, Oliver, here's the thing. If Putin was going to send somebody to shoot at Donald Trump, and I don't think he would do that. I see Donald Trump trying to pull something off like that. I don't think Putin would waste his time. But if Putin was involved, he wouldn't get a 20-year-old kid who is bullied and has some issues. I don't think they would have done that. And if the goal was to shoot Donald Trump, he would have been shot. He would have been killed. I don't know that Putin and Orban, if they were involved, they maybe gave him the strategy. This is something that was pulled off by somebody local if it was faked. Now, the interesting thing I heard, and this is really weird because we're talking about how the Secret Service failed on this motherfucking thing. We heard a story yesterday that apparently there was a credible threat of an assassination attempt against Donald Trump by people in Iran. Some Iranian terrorist group was going to take him out because they don't like Donald Trump. Well, so what happened was when they heard that, they upped the coverage and the security for Donald Trump. So that never happened. That was quelled, but he had extra security going into the speech, and they still failed in this fucking thing. Says a lot about our Secret Service, and we know the Secret Service was complicit with Donald Trump in January 6th, 2021. You got to question, what is the condition of our Secret Service at this point. Once we get beyond this election, we need to take a hard look and a serious audit into the Secret Service. They're supposed to be protecting our president, and if they can't protect Donald Trump, can they protect Joe Biden? That's my biggest fear. All right, the next one says, "Hi, Mike, a female boomer at age 67, lifelong tree-hugging liberal, and a Democrat from La La Land, South California, Southern California. Your podcast has done wonders to keep my spirits up ever since my husband turned me on to you. I have so many friends who are beyond frightened and convinced Diaper Donnie will win. Every time I point them to your podcast, you rock." Well, thank you very much. "I walk with friends at a local botanical garden twice a week. This week we are chatting about 45 as we walked in, and some other old ladies overheard us and snagged us, so we stopped to chat. When they told me how terrified they were, I first assured them Biden would win, then told them they must listen to the rational boomer." That is much appreciated. I'm thrilled to have you to send friends to, and I'm so very grateful. You're a treasure. Keep up the amazing work. Cheers, Sean. Well, thank you very much, Sean. I've said this before. The idea that I'm helping to calm people's nerves is a byproduct of trying to keep my own nerves calmed. From a very young age, I've always looked at problems a little differently, like in my 20s or so. Before that, I was prone to getting upset and excited and unhinged because I was scared of something. And then at some point, and I don't know how that is, I realized that every time I did that, it was making things worse. So I rationalized out. I said, I got to do the opposite. I got to stay calm. I got to look at the situation, analyze the situation, look at it from all angles, and decide what's the best call or what's the best way to attack it. And over the years, it's become second nature to me. It's not like my mind's worrying all the time and I'm always trying to analyze things. That's not how it works. Because I've done it for the better part of my life, it's become second nature. And that's just what I do every time I look at something or somebody. I'm good at reading people. And this all stems back to my father, actually. My father was a narcissistic, sociopathic, pathological liar with a bad temper. And when you're 7 years old and your dad loses his shit and says some horrible things to you, you get a little afraid. And when you get afraid, you either curl up and die or you try to figure out how you're going to survive. And thankfully, I went to the latter. And the way I decided to survive was to pay close attention to my father and the situations with my father. I learned how to read his facial tics, his words, just everything he did. And I could see when he was going down the wrong path. So I had enough sense, even at a very young age, to say, okay, I'm going to try to pull him out of that and send him down another track so I don't have to deal with the rage that he's going to force on me. And through doing that, that's pretty much what I've done all my life when it comes to people I deal with. I always read them. And again, it's not something that keeps worrying in my mind. I can do it pretty quickly. And the same thing is with problems. Now, my wife is more prone to getting excited and upset and worry and all this stuff. And I'm not that way. If I have a problem in front of me, I say, okay, that's the problem. I look at all the angles and then I look at how I'm going to attack it. So when I do this on the podcast, it really wasn't intended for you people. It was for my sake, for my own comfort. The fact that by telling you these things through the way I think about these things have given you comfort is a great honor to be able to do that. And I'm thankful that that is a byproduct of this. It wasn't intended, I don't think. Maybe it was, but that's how I get to where I'm going. So when you tell me you keep me sane or you keep me calm, I'm glad. Because when it comes down to dealing with things, being calm and thinking these things out with a reasonable, rational mind, it's always going to turn out better. All right, well, we had some big news yesterday. U.S. Senator Bob Menendez was convicted of all charges at his corruption trial Tuesday, including accepting bribes of gold and cash from the New Jersey businessman three New Jersey businessmen and acting as a foreign agent for the Egyptian government. Prosecutors said the Democrat abused the power of his office to protect allies from criminal investigations and enrich associates. Now, this isn't the first time that he got himself in trouble. He went on trial for something very similar back, I think, in 2018. What came out of that was that he he got a hung jury and he got off, and they didn't re-prosecute him, which they probably should have. So once again, a rich guy with some power got away with being a fucking crook. Well, this time around, it didn't work out. He was charged with 16 felonies, bribery and corruption and the like, and he was found guilty of all 16 charges. Now, the maximum penalty for this kind of thing is well over 100 years. He won't get the maximum, but I think he's around 70 or so, maybe older than that. Even if he gets 5 or 10 years, he's done. And he's going to get jail time. It's inevitable in this situation, especially with his track record. The interesting thing about it, if this were a Republican, they would say weaponization of the DOJ. He didn't do it. It's all a lie. It's all a hoax. The Democrats take a different tact. The Democrats said, okay, he's convicted. Now he must resign his position. That's what they're going to do. And if he doesn't resign, then they're going to look at ways of expelling him. And frankly, we haven't had a senator expelled in well over 100 years. So this would be unprecedented. But the Democrats are doing the right thing. Throw the garbage out. And that's exactly who Menendez is. Now, Menendez's wife was also charged in these crimes, but they put a hold on her case because apparently she's contracted breast cancer and she's going through treatment. So they're giving her some time to go through that before they start the prosecution. What else is interesting? He's a U.S. senator, but he has a son that's in the House of Representatives. That's going to be interesting. And something I once told you before, interestingly enough, Bob Menendez has a daughter. I think it's Elise Menendez or Elise or something like that. Well, she's a commentator on MSNBC. She's filled in for a lot of people. She does the weekends and she does reports and such. And as I watch her, knowing that, I'm thinking, how do you do that? Your dad's going to go to jail for life. Your mom may go to jail for life. And here you are on MSNBC with a smile talking about the news of the day. Now, grant you, they don't have her talking about Menendez, about her dad, because that would probably be pretty fucked up. But again, the Democrats are the adults in the room dealing with a bad situation properly. And that's good to see, finally. And this is why Democrats have to take control. The other side is just whacked out and a problem for this country. Now, this was an interesting story, and I was curious as to how this was going to play out. Now, on Monday, you have the show on MSNBC, Morning Joe. It's pretty popular. It's Joe Scarborough, his wife, Mika, and some other folks. And for whatever reason, on Monday, they pulled the show from the air. And some people are speculating it was because Joe or Mika had talked so badly about Donald Trump that they were afraid that people would say, well, they incited this attack on Donald Trump, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it's typical for the fucking mass media that we're becoming used to. Now, moments before, Morning Joe co-host Joe Scarborough took his bosses to task for pulling his show on Monday following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life. The MSNBC host criticized his colleague Lester Holt over his interview with President Joe Biden. Thank you. Finally, some truth and some decency coming out of mainstream media. On Monday night, as the Republican National Convention kicked into high gear, NBC released the sit-down interview between Holt and Biden. And on Tuesday morning, Scarborough shared a clip and expressed his displeasure at what transpired. It took some courage. He's got some power at MSNBC, but when you call out the top newsman in the organization, it's kind of asking for trouble. Speaking with fellow MSNBC host Al Sharpton, Scarborough stated he needed to address Holt's obsession with getting Biden to admit he is engaged in violent rhetoric and needs to tone down his criticism of the former president. We just need to talk about that line of questioning from NBC's Lester Holt, the MSNBC host stated after the clip ended. It was an important question to ask about what President Biden said in a private fundraiser to donors. It's a question I would have asked. I think any of us would have asked that question, but to ask that question without any context about the politically violent rhetoric that Republicans have been engaged in for close to a decade. We could talk about Nancy Pelosi. We could talk about the assassinations of Joint Chiefs, the hangings of Mike Pence. We could go on and on and on. We could talk about it on both sides. Again, a good question to ask, but what he said in a private fundraiser, a good question to ask. I would have to ask the same question, but to ask that question absent of any context seems to me to be, you talk about phony moral relativism. It was screaming throughout the part of the interview, and I must say I was shocked, he added. And again, Joe also addressed a decision by NBC higher-ups to boot his show on Monday, the first day they would have been on the air after the attempt on Donald Trump's life. Viewers on Monday were furious to find Morning Joe preempted on Monday, and Scarborough seemed to share their anger. I just wanted to briefly talk to our friends and viewers that watch us every day, he tersely began. Talk about what happened yesterday. We were told in no uncertain terms on Sunday evening that there was going to be one news feed across all NBC news channels yesterday. The Today Show would be Lester Holt, other people that, well, you worked with on Sunday. That was going to be one news feed across all NBC news channels, that we were going to stay as a network in breaking news mode throughout all day yesterday. That did not happen, he accused. We don't know why that didn't happen. Our team was not given a good answer as to why that didn't happen, but it didn't happen. We were also told it was going to happen throughout the day, he added. I guess after there was such a strong blowback about yesterday morning, I guess they changed their plans, and so those plans changed as well. So it didn't, he added, we've talked about it off the air. We'll talk about it on the air because we talk about everything on the air. We were very surprised. We were very disappointed. If we had known there wasn't going to be the one news feed from NBC across all NBC news channels, we obviously would have been in yesterday morning. Co-host Mika Brzezinski interjected, let me just say, the next time we're told there's going to be a news feed replacing us, we will be in our chairs. So clearly they're pissed off. And of course, the viewers were pissed off. And of course, NBC made a poor choice. The question is, why did they make that choice? Was there something bigger than just some stupid idea? I tend to think so. And I'm surprised that Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski called them out on the air. It'll be interesting to see if there's any blowback on them for embarrassing their bosses. I hope there's not, because I think what Scarborough and Mika did was absolutely important for them to do. You got to maintain credibility, and you've got to do what the viewers want. That's what I try to do here on the podcast. Regardless of people like it or not, we do what we got to do. So I applaud them for doing that. Not a big Morning Joe fan, but I do watch it occasionally, and I give them credit for being treated poorly by their own corporation. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time to listen. Hope you have a great day. And of course, we'll talk to you again tomorrow.